I'd now like to invite Mr. Ajay Chaturvedi on the stage. You know, Mr. Kanta Rao was mentioning in the earlier session that how there is this plan to have every one person from every household in India be illiterate. I think Ajay's company HarVa, which has rural BPOs across 4 states now, if I'm not mistaken, is an important partner for initiatives like that, because there is this business model that he's developed that can do that and also provide women, and most of his rural BPOs, will tell you more, are staffed by women. We all know when a woman gets literacy or exposure, that's always passed on, be it to her children, to her rest of the family, or to her husbands. Thank you, Ajay, for being here.
Thanks a lot, Shrestri, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I guess it was unfortunate the fog that people didn't make it, but really appreciate the opportunity. I think there's a video here that should have been downloaded. Okay, perfect. So let me quickly take you through a presentation. I would not spend a lot of time here, but and I think Rikin and I we keep bumping into each other in different conferences. There's a lot of opportunity for us to work together, and this is the first time that I actually saw his presentation. So I think there's now truly a big opportunity. So the organization that I have is HarVa. My background briefly is that I spent about a decade in the US and I worked with Citibank. That's where I really got the opportunity to understand what people are trying to do in terms of tapping India. And that's why the model that HarVa implements or trying to implement is really a complete flip. So far people have talked about value at the bottom of the pyramid, but you're really trying to sell to the rural consumer, right? So you're looking at it as a consumerist economy. Whereas I truly believe that unless you're producing something, there's no point giving them or selling them something. So primarily what people are looking at is selling them Coke, Pepsi, Lay's chips, Pan Parag, whatever, right? And then you've got cancer hospitals for treating whatever they've contracted. So over a period of time when I was with financial services, I realized that unless you're really creating value at the bottom of the pyramid, there is no way that you can tap that value, which is the reason why most of us find that the penetration of most of the products has not come about to the extent that we expected initially. With that, HarVa really stands for green, means green in Hindi, and our vision is really to be able to create economic and social value for business and clients, maintaining the standard industry quality metrics across the world. Right? So not treat it as somebody lower and then try to empower them. In fact, I go exactly opposite of empowerment. I say, if I'm trying to empower somebody, I'm already saying I'm more powerful. And if you're trying to be equal, then you've got to really start off on the equal footing. So with that, I think all of us really know what the potential of rural economy is. Briefly, to touch upon a couple of metrics, what really changed my direction was looking at the insurance industry penetration. As a banker, if I were to ask somebody, why do you think the insurance industry penetration is so low, life insurance industry, 90% of the people will say, well, because people are not educated, they don't understand what the benefit of insurance is. But the fact is, we're still under 5% of penetration in life insurance industry across the country, and 70 years, the who's who of insurance companies have been in India around the world. The reason is that people don't understand or they don't get the value of the product that we're trying to sell them. So we're trying to sell them life insurance. What would really make sense for them is land insurance or crop insurance. So that's one of the biggest reasons why insurance industry penetration is still under 5%. We've got rural household expenses. We could go about 70, 80 kilometers out from here, right this point, into rural India, and we find that the average rural household expense for maintaining the same quality of living, not the same brand, just the same quality of living, is less than 10% of that what we'd be spending over here. So that itself gives us the sense of the size of the opportunity with the size of the country, and 80% of that market still being untapped. So what we're really trying to do, briefly I'll go through, we're basically trying to create a self-sustainable ecosystem, but a non-consumeristic ecosystem. So we're not trying to sell to rural India. In fact, we're trying to create and sell out of rural India, right? And for that, the biggest opportunity that, of course, to be able to create that value, we need to get into the place. And just on a side note, the biggest challenge in the world today is really distribution. So we're producing enough food, we're producing enough water, we're producing enough of everything, but the people who need it, we're not able to get it to them. So the problem or the challenge is distribution, but that's really something that governments need to address. So what, after this whole stint, I realized that the best way of producing something is to do distributed production in those areas that don't have access to, let's say, clean water, food or shelter or whatnot. But in order to get there, I need to first get them the information and enrich them with the information. And I do that by the internet. So what we really end up doing is, partnering with the private sectors, public sectors, social enterprises, the whole ecosystem, and the services that we provide. So let me really come to the proverbial heart. So what we try and do is, just get into rural India, and for the most part, these are low-produce agricultural areas with about 300 to 600,000 people population in the catchment area. So about 10-kilometer radius, that's the population that would be. We then enable this with internet by whichever means possible. So when we started out the first huts, we actually enabled this with data cards, and we because it was a black area. Now this is the classic mistake that most of the telecom companies are doing, that when we're talking about the highest mobile penetration, most of those places don't actually get mobile connections in their villages. They have to give an address outside somewhere. So if we wanted to get it there, we had to purchase a data card for every computer, every PC. And we ended up spending, for 50 computers, we spent about 75,000 rupees per month just to get the internet. So after 4 or 5 months, we were able to create a case for them to lay down the line, and we were able to get internet continuously. So once we get the internet, we train the women for free. And this again is, like I said, I did not start out with women empowerment. This is something that comes in. If you go to a, whereas the media is talking about khar panchayats, female infanticide, highest youth sex ratios, we got burqa system and the Google system, whereas in the same villages, we went out and set up the first all-women rural BPO. So that's the classic information divide. Once these people get the opportunity and you're giving them free training, all we ended up getting was women candidates. So most of the women who turned up got trained, and we set up the rural BPOs, which have all women. Now they end up doing work which is in US and UK. That's another big challenge. That's the innovation that I will talk about, or the video will show. They're basically doing process jobs. Once we got the women, we then start to attract students to register in our student help desks for free of cost. Now this is again classic. We're talking about education sector as the biggest opportunity in India, whereas that's one of the biggest opportunities. You have about 70, 80 business schools around Delhi, which are almost on the verge of going out of business because they can't get students. Yet you have about 20 million students around Delhi who don't have access to education. So this is the classic mismatch. Either they don't have information, or they don't have access to these universities, or they're not able to pay. Whichever way, it's a solvable problem. We just need to connect the dots. So after the student help desk, where we've registered close to 500,000 students so far across 7 states, we've managed to address or counsel about 5,000 students of those. After that, we connect with farming help desks. Because the women are working, the farmers actually are able to come to us, and we've been able to connect over 1,000 farmers. Now, these farmers typically get advice in irrigation. So what's the best kind of irrigation, for example, either drip irrigation or sprinkler irrigation. They get on crop diversification, so what are the different kinds of crops that they can actually do, on increasing throughput, and then getting better prices. I just saw this movie last night, Matru Ki Bijli Ka Mandola. That's actually exactly what's happening in Haryana today. So I'm witness to some of those things. If we could actually just connect them digitally, a lot of those problems would be solved. Sounds very simple. It's quite complicated to execute on the ground. And then after that, what we do is we connect these farmers and we get them to dump their cow dung in our gobar gas plants. It's a self-sustainable ecosystem. Now the challenge there is, whereas India is the highest producer of milk, we also waste the highest amount of milk. Now, if you've got so many poor people who are going hungry, why can't we just give that milk to them instead of wasting? The challenge is we can't even preserve it because we don't have electricity. We don't have electricity because we don't have the distribution, but we're producing enough. So if this is an experiment we did with MIT, and when we get the farmers to get their cow dung into the gobar gas plants, one gobar gas plant, which is 50 cattle cow digester, produces enough electricity for 45 computers. But once we scale that up to 1,000 cattle gobar gas digester, it produces enough electricity for 1,500 computers. This is the model that we're really trying to go ahead and sort of replicate. So that's really, in a sense, a self-sustainable HarVa digital hut ecosystem. We've managed to go to 4 states so far. We had scaled up to 11 huts, but we had to scale down to 4. My primary challenge today is not any more money or getting business. It's really about people. We all talk about it passionately, but 90% of the people that I speak with have not actually gone to a village, right? And we've gone to about 70, 80, 90 kilometers outside the cities. So that's really what we're doing. In a sense, what it ends up doing is, gets the women, they are now working, they are now educated, and I'll show you a couple of case studies as well. After that, what we end up doing is, sort of end up facilitating HarVa employee loan programs, which then just links them up to the banks. So instead of starting with finance and giving them money to spend to get goods and commodities, we actually first enable them to earn so that they can actually pay back. Now it makes a lot more sense to give them a loan. With that said, the whole ecosystem then sort of we link up to the corporations. It's a mutual benefit. Just an example, Microsoft's biggest challenge today is to expand into new markets. But if they were to look at India primarily, and there's different facets to it, I'm putting it very simplistically, it's not as simple as that. Microsoft's biggest challenge in India is not a software company or a software operating system. Their biggest challenge is Nehru Place. And they can't solve it until they actually get to the customer. But in order to get to the customer, they have to first lower the product price. And not only that, they have to customize it to that local need. So what we end up doing with companies like such is we end up localizing the product in our own centers, and that's what lowers their cost as well. Then it gives them further access to the market. So that's one example. Banks and financial services institutions, again, the classic problem. SBI might have the biggest distribution, but in the villages that we're working in are fairly wealthy villages, but have the highest amount of delinquencies. But we have, by virtue of our centers, access to these women, and they can get the data that most of the banks don't have access to. Similarly, for healthcare institutions, they're looking for access to newer markets and be able to cure diseases. Our eventual goal is to be able to set up 100 huts in 20 states in the next 3 to 4 years. I'm nowhere close to that goal, but very, very hopeful that we will be able to achieve that. Several setbacks, but we've been able to accomplish some significant milestones. And so far, we've managed to affect about 1,000 farmers. We've managed to register 500,000 students. We've counseled about 5,000 of those students. We've got about 500 women working in the rural BPOs today across 4 states. But by virtue of the student help desk and farming help desk, we've gone to 7 states. So those are some of the classic things we've done. Case studies, that's some of our accomplishments for different case studies and places. But this is a classic example. Suman Devi, and you'll see her in the video as well. About 2.5 years ago, she did not know what a computer was. But today she has more friends on Facebook than I do, and that's where Rickin's model kind of comes into the picture. So this is the classic one that we've been able to accomplish. This is one of our centers. On the left is in Rajgarh, close to Pilani. On the right is in a village called Tikli. So that's what we've been able to accomplish. Let me quickly show you a video. I hope this plays. I'm sorry, I apologize. It's just not working. Okay.
Thank you, Ajay.